A single dad gets rejected at a 5-star restaurant. A lonely millionaire widow watching invites him to dine with her. "Excuse me, sir. Do you have a reservation?" The maitre d's voice cut through the warm lobby of La Fontaine like a blade. His smile was tight, practiced, meant to look polite, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Cole Morgan straightened his shoulders, one hand resting protectively on his daughter Leia's back. She was 5, dressed in a soft purple dress with a hand-stitched hem, her curls tied with a ribbon. She was clutching a tiny fabric purse her late mother had sewn for her years ago. "I called 3 days ago," Cole said, clearing his throat. "The reservation is under Morgan for 7 o'clock. The maitre d' barely glanced at the reservation book. "I'm afraid I don't see it." "Here," he said, closing the leather cover with a quiet final snap. "And we do have a strict dress code. No denim, no work boots." Cole's jaw tightened. He had polished those boots until they gleamed. His shirt had no grease stains and was pressed flat with a warm towel. His hands, calloused from years of fixing engines, were scrubbed clean until the skin nearly cracked. "It's my daughter's birthday," he said quietly, "her first one without her mom." The maitre d' simply raised an eyebrow. "That's unfortunate, but we are at capacity tonight, and appearances matter here at La Fontaine." Leia looked up, confusion shadowing her bright, innocent face. "Daddy, why can't we go in?" Cole bent down to meet her eyes, his own heart aching. "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll find somewhere even better. But you said this one was special," she whispered, her voice trembling, "like the ones in Mommy's stories." A flush of heat climbed Cole's neck as he felt the eyes of the other patrons on him. Every table around them seemed to fall quiet. A few guests cast sidelong glances, some annoyed, others quietly uncomfortable. But no one said a word. No one except for her. "I believe you're mistaken," came a calm, clear voice from a nearby table. "This gentleman and his daughter are my guests." Cole turned to see a woman rising from a corner table by the window. She wore an elegant yet understated dress, the deep green of pine needles, her dark hair swept into a loose chignon. She moved with the kind of grace that came not from money alone, but from surviving something profound. The maitre d' stiffened instantly. "Miss Davenport, do you really want to make this a conversation in front of all your guests?" Her tone didn't waver, but there was steel just beneath the surface. "Because I will, and I assure you I will. Speak very clearly." The maitre d' swallowed hard. "Of course not. If they're with you, then right this way." Cole hesitated, stunned and unsure. But Ava stepped forward, offering her hand, not with pity, but with a sense of shared purpose. "I have a table for 3, if you would do me the honor of joining me." Leia looked at her father, her eyes wide with wonder. Cole remained frozen, caught between his pride and his daughter's hope. "Please," Ava said, again, her voice lower now, more intimate. This night means something to her. Don't let it end like this. Cole finally took her hand, its warmth a surprising comfort. "Thank you," he said, barely more than a whisper. They followed her to the table, Leia skipping slightly as the promise of magic returned to her. "Step." Ava pulled out a chair for the little girl herself, a gesture of genuine kindness. She then asked the waiter for a children's menu and a Shirley Temple with extra cherries. "Is this a fairy tale restaurant?" "Daddy?" Leia whispered, her eyes dancing under the light of the grand chandelier. Cole looked across the table at Ava, who offered him a soft, reassuring smile. "Maybe it is now, sweetheart." The soft clinking of cutlery filled the space as the waiter poured water into 3 crystal glasses. Cole sat tensely, his eyes darting around the lavish restaurant, occasionally landing on his daughter. Leia's legs swung happily under her chair, her gaze fixed on the napkin, folded into a swan, the earlier hurt now replaced with pure wonder. Ava observed them quietly, her fingers circling the stem of her wine glass. She could feel the unease radiating off Cole like a low hum. I really appreciate this," Cole said suddenly, breaking the silence. "You didn't have to do that." Ava shook her head, a gentle smile playing on her lips. You don't owe me anything. I didn't do it out of pity. I did it because for a moment you reminded me of what truly matters. Cole frowned slightly, confused. What do you mean? When I was 9, Ava said softly, her gaze distant. My dad took me to a small restaurant he'd saved up for months. He forgot to check the prices on the menu. We were thrown out when he couldn't pay the bill. The owner called us thieves. Cole stared at her, silent, the tension in his own shoulders beginning to ease. My father cried that night, she continued, her voice quiet but steady. It changed him and it changed me. I swore that if I ever had the chance, I'd never let someone feel that kind of shame, especially not in front of their child. Leia tugged at Cole's sleeve, pulling him back to the present. Daddy, remember what Mommy said about birthdays? Cole's face softened into a genuine smile. Of course, Peanut. Turning to Ava, Leia added, proudly, she said birthdays should feel like fairy tales with magic and nice people. Ava let out a quiet laugh, her eyes glistening. She must have been a remarkable woman. She was, Cole said, his voice low and filled with a love that was still very much alive. The waiter returned with a basket of warm bread. As Leia reached for a piece, her small hand knocked over her water glass, the spill spreading quickly across the white tablecloth. Oh, no, she gasped, her eyes welling up with tears. Without a moment's hesitation, Cole was on his knees beside her, blotting the mess with his own napkin. It's okay, sweetheart. Accidents happen. Leia looked uncertain, her lip trembling. Cole smiled warmly. Even princesses spill things sometimes, and they always get forgiven because they are so very loved. Ava felt a quiet, familiar ache form in her chest. The tenderness in his voice, the gentle way he turned a simple accident into a moment of reassurance. It touched something long dormant within her. As they continued their meal, the mood warmed considerably. Cole talked about his job at the auto body shop. Leia jumped in, proudly explaining how she helped organize his wrenches and sockets. Ava listened, truly engaged, smiling as she learned about their world. After the main course, Ava signaled the waiter, I hope you like dessert. I ordered something special for the birthday girl. Soon, 3 plates arrived, each holding a perfect dome of orange mousse topped with a delicate piece of candied peel. Leia gasped. It's so shiny. Cole raised an eyebrow. This looks expensive. Ava chuckled softly. It was my husband's favorite. He used to say it was like eating sunshine on a spoon. Cole's expression softened completely. Thank you for sharing that with us. As they tasted the dessert, the last of the tension in Cole's shoulders finally melted away. Leia giggled, her happiness infectious. Ava leaned back in her chair, watching them not as an outsider, but as someone being gently drawn into their light. Maybe, she thought to herself, fairy tales didn't always require wands and spells. Sometimes they began with a spilled glass of water and a father who knew, above all else, how to love. It started with the bookstore. Cole had promised Leia she could pick out a birthday book, a tradition he and her mother had started long before she could even read. They went to Bell and Pine Books, a cozy shop on the corner with creaky wooden floors and a golden bell that jingled when the door opened. Leia ran straight to the children's aisle, already deep in decision-making mode, while Cole trailed behind, careful not to step on scattered plushies. And then he saw her. Ava stood at a nearby shelf, thumbing through a hardcover with a thoughtful frown. She looked up, surprised at first, and then her face broke into a warm smile. Well, hello again, Cole nodded politely, a little shyly. Miss Davenport? She gave a mock wince. Ava, please. Otherwise, I'll feel like I'm your accountant. He offered a small, guarded smile, the same one he wore at the restaurant. Didn't expect to see you here. I live just a block away. I come here to think, she replied, holding up the book, and to buy things I absolutely do not need. You're getting a birthday book, he said, nodding toward Leia, who was now trying to balance 2 picture books and a plush unicorn. Ava's eyes softened as she watched her. She's beautiful. She gets that from her mother, Cole said, automatically his voice dipping slightly. Ava didn't press further. She simply smiled, placed her book back on the shelf, and said, well, maybe we'll bump into each other again, and they did. 2 days later, at the park, Cole was pushing Leia on the swings, enjoying the cool breeze and her delighted giggles. Just then, Ava passed by with a large iced coffee in a paper bag tucked under her arm. She waved casually, almost as if it were a complete coincidence. Fancy meeting you here. Hey, Leia shouted with excitement. It's the fairy tale lady, Ava laughed. A sound like wind chimes, and walked over. She asked if she could push Leia on the swing for a little while. Cole hesitated for a split second, but Leia cheered, yes, please. And so that was that. From then on, the coincidental sightings became more frequent. They saw her at the Sunday farmers market, at a community concert in the town square, and even at a hot dog stand during a food truck festival. Each time Ava made it seem natural, never forceful, never presumptuous. She chatted with Leia, asking about her favorite stories, her new light-up sneakers, and her favorite superhero of the week. She never overstepped her bounds. And Cole, he just watched. He watched the way Ava crouched down to talk to Leia at eye level. He saw how she instinctively tied the girl's shoelace when it came undone without being asked. He noticed how she never once looked at her phone when Leia was speaking to her. And he saw how Leia so naturally and effortlessly had started to call her Miss Ava. Still, Cole kept his emotional distance. One afternoon, while Leia was captivated by a puppet show at the park, he turned to Ava. I appreciate what you're doing, he said, his voice low and serious. But I don't want Leia to get attached to someone who might just disappear. Ava looked at him, not insulted, not surprised, just understanding. I understand your concern, but I'm not doing this out of charity, Cole. I genuinely enjoy spending time with her and with you. He didn't respond, just nodded once, the shield in his eyes still firmly in place. That shield began to crack, quietly on a Tuesday night. It was an event at the local community center, an outdoor screening of an old animated film. Families were spread out on blankets on the grass, the air filled with the smell of popcorn. Leia snuggled under a blanket beside Ava while Cole sat nearby, arms crossed, watching them more than the movie. Halfway through the film, Ava leaned toward him and whispered, I never told you about my daughter. Cole turned to her, his eyebrows raised in surprise. Her name was Isla. She was 7. My husband died in a car accident while he was picking up her birthday cake. A drunk driver ran a red light. She was never the same after that. She stopped eating, stopped talking, much. We found out later that her heart was failing. It was some congenital defect that no one had ever caught, Cole said. Nothing, just stared at the vibrant colors on the screen, his face unreadable. She passed away a year later, Ava whispered, the pain still fresh in her voice. And after that, I did nothing but work, just trying not to feel anything, until I saw you and Leia that night. And I remembered what it felt like to try and make just one single night magical. Cole finally looked at her, his voice rough with emotion. I'm so sorry, Ava. Ava shook her head gently. You don't have to be. Just let me be a part of this. Even if it's just a little. The screen glowed with color, and laughter echoed around them in the park. But for that brief, quiet moment, it was just the two of them. Two people carrying their grief in different shapes, bound together by the fragile, hopeful thread of a little girl's joy. Later that week, as they left the playground, a small boy on his bike tripped and fell near the fountain. His handlebars were bent awkwardly, and tears were already springing to his eyes. Before his mother could even react, Cole was at his side. He knelt down, checked the brakes, expertly adjusted the frame, and with a practiced flick of his wrist, set the chain back on its track. You're good to go, buddy, he said with a warm, easy grin. Ava stood behind him, watching in silence. She saw not just the act itself, but the gentleness, the patience, the quiet, protective instinct. Something warm and hopeful bloomed in her chest. Maybe these meetings weren't just coincidence. Maybe this was Grace simply dressed up as timing. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Cole was in the middle of changing the oil on a customer's truck when his phone buzzed. It buzzed once, then again, and then again until the vibration felt like a crack of thunder against the concrete floor. It was the school and then another number he didn't recognize. He answered on the third call, grease smudged on his hands, a cold panic rising in his throat. "Mr. Morgan, this is Nurse Hensley from Lakeview Elementary. Your daughter, Leia, collapsed during story time. We've called an ambulance." Time seemed to slow down and stretch into an eternity. By the time he reached the hospital, Leia was already in a private room. She looked so small and pale, hooked up to wires and monitors, her eyes closed. Her little dress was still smudged, with colorful finger paint from art class. The doctor, a calm man in his 50s, greeted Cole with words that would echo in his mind for days. "It's a congenital heart valve defect. It's likely been there since birth," but it was subtle, mild fatigue, shortness of breath, often mistaken for just being a tired kid. Today's fainting spell, however, has triggered a much deeper concern. Cole blinked, trying desperately to make sense of the clinical words. "What are you saying?" "She'll need surgery," the doctor stated plainly. "A valve repair. The sooner the better." Cole's mouth felt like it was full of cotton. "How much?" The doctor hesitated for a moment. "With pre-op, post-op care, and the hospitalization, it's significant." Cole nodded once, then sat down hard in a nearby chair before his legs gave out. He didn't ask for the exact number. He didn't have to. He already knew it was more than he could ever afford. For 3 days, Cole barely left the hospital. He dozed in an uncomfortable, upright chair beside Leia's bed, holding her tiny hand while machines beeped a constant, unnerving rhythm. Nurses came and went in a blur. He didn't cry, not in front of her. But each time she looked at him, with those half-lidded, tired eyes, and tried to smile, something deep inside him cracked. Ava came on the 4th evening. She arrived quietly, holding a bouquet of soft pink tulips in a paper bag that smelled faintly of cinnamon and honey. "I heard," she said gently, standing in the doorway, not wanting to intrude. Cole didn't respond at first. He looked thinner, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion and fear. "I'm so sorry, Cole," she said, placing the flowers in an empty vase on the windowsill. "I brought some cinnamon bread. I remember you said she liked it." Cole finally looked at her, his voice hoarse. "Thank you, but we're fine." Ava stepped back slightly, hearing the defensive edge in his tone. "I'm not here to intrude." He just nodded, then turned his attention back to Leia. She was asleep, her breath shallow, but steady. "Is there anything I can do?" Ava asked after a long, heavy pause. Cole's jaw tightened, the bitterness finally spilling over. "Unless you've got $100 grand lying around, no." She flinched, slightly, not from the words themselves, but from the raw pain behind them. "I just wanted her to have one more storybook birthday," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Now I might not even get to see her next one." Ava stayed only a few more minutes. She laid the warm bread on the bedside tray and softly brushed a stray curl from Leia's hair. She leaned down and kissed the girl's forehead, whispering something only Leia could hear, and then she left without another word. A week passed. Cole hadn't showered properly, hadn't been home, hadn't gone back to work. He was in the hospital cafeteria, sipping burnt, stale coffee when his phone rang. It was the hospital's finance office. "We're calling to inform you that a donor has come forward, an anonymous donor. The surgery will be fully covered." Cole nearly dropped the phone. He asked who it was, his heart pounding. They simply repeated that the donor wished to remain completely anonymous. That night, Ava came back. This time, she brought a small, beautiful book. It was hardbound, a vintage copy, with gold embossed lettering on the front that read, "A treasury of fairy tales." Leia was awake, her eyes brighter than they'd been all weak. She gasped with delight at the sight of the book and begged Ava to read from it. Ava sat by her bed and opened it to the first story, her voice soft but rich with feeling. Halfway through the tale, Leia reached for her hand. "I saw Mommy in my dream last night," she said, clearly. Ava paused her reading. "You did?" Leia nodded. "She told me someone would come. Someone who would love Daddy, even if he didn't believe it yet." Ava blinked rapidly, looking down at the page, trying to find her place. "And she said I'll get a new heart, so I can love even more people." Cole stood in the doorway, listening, unseen. He didn't move. He didn't speak. But for the first time in a long time, something in his eyes began to shift, like sunlight finally touching frozen ground. The envelope sat tucked between a pile of hospital forms and medical instructions on Cole's kitchen table. It was buried under brochures and outdated bills he'd ignored for weeks. It had been 3 days since Leia's surgery was confirmed and scheduled, and Cole was finally trying to sort through the mess of his life. He almost tossed the envelope aside, assuming it was another generic letter from the insurance company. But something about the crisp, official typeface made him pause. He slid his thumb beneath the flap and pulled out a folded document. It was a billing summary from the hospital's finance department. Everything looked standard until he saw it. At the very bottom of the final page, just above the line labeled Authorized Payment Source, was a signature he had seen only once before, written in elegant ink. Ava M. Davenport. Cole froze. For a long moment he just stared at the paper, as if willing the name to change. The numbers, the total cost of the surgery, the itemized fees, every single cent had been covered by her. He blinked once, then again, but the name didn't disappear. His chest tightened, a storm of confusion and shame bubbling up into raw anger. His hands shook as he reached for his jacket. Ava was at the community greenhouse, her hands covered in rich soil as she repotted a line of fragrant lavender plants. She looked peaceful, humming softly to herself. Working with the earth had always helped her feel grounded, literally. When Cole arrived, he stood silently for a moment, just watching her. Then he held up the crumpled paper. "You paid for her surgery." Ava looked up slowly, her expression unreadable as she blinked in the bright sunlight. She didn't speak. "You paid," he said again, his voice louder now, laced with accusation. "You went behind my back and signed your name on it like I'm some kind of charity case." Ava carefully set down her trowel. "Cole, please. Did you think I wouldn't find out? That I'm too stupid or too grateful to notice?" "No," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I hoped you would understand before it had a chance to hurt." He shook his head, stepping closer, his anger eclipsing his reason. "I didn't ask for your help. I know you didn't," she said, "but I gave it because I could and because she needed it." He scoffed, the sound bitter and sharp. "No, you did it because it made you feel better, because you get to play the savior, like it erases whatever guilt you're carrying around." Ava's eyes flickered, and her mouth trembled, slightly at the unfairness of his words. "That's not fair." "Fair?" he snapped, his pride wounded. "I work double shifts. I make Leia's lunch every single morning. I sew the rips in her jeans myself. I tuck her in at night, and I tell her stories, and I promise her that I will always find a way to take care of her. And you just sign a check and expect to be part of our lives like it was earned." "I never wanted to replace you," Ava whispered, her voice cracking. "No, but you wanted to buy your way." And whoa, a heavy silence fell between them, thick with unspoken pain. Then Ava's voice came out barely audible. "My daughter didn't make it. I had the money. I had the best doctors. I had everything. But I was too late. She was already slipping through my fingers, and no amount of love or wealth in the world could hold her." Here, Cole stood perfectly still, his anger draining away, replaced by a cold shock. "I couldn't save her," Ava continued, her voice trembling with the weight of her grief. "And I have to live with that every single day. But then I saw Leia, and I saw a second chance. Not for me to be a mother again, but a second chance for her. For you." I just did what I wished someone could have done for me. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. This wasn't pity. It was grief finally finding somewhere to go. Cole looked away, his jaw clenched, tight with shame. Ava wiped her hands on her apron and picked up her purse. You can pay me back over time if that makes you feel stronger. But don't you dare punish your daughter for the kindness that your own pride can't accept. And with that, she walked away. She didn't wait for a response, her shoulders straight and her head held high, but tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Cole stood frozen amid the scent of lavender and his own broken pride. That night, Leia was sitting on the living room floor with a small notebook in her lap. It was her mother's old journal, filled mostly with blank pages, but Leia had started drawing in it since the news of the surgery. She called it her new heart book. Cole was on the couch, staring at the same document, crumpled now in his fist. His jaw had softened, but his heart still waged a war between pride and shame. Leia stood up, walked quietly over to him, and placed a torn-out page in his lap. It was a crayon drawing of a little family. There was a man with rough, strong hands and a little girl with curly hair. And standing next to them was a woman with long dark hair in a green dress. They were all standing together, beneath a sky full of bright yellow stars. The woman's hand rested gently on the man's shoulder. Cole stared at the simple drawing, his throat tight. She was in my dream again, Leia said softly. Mommy. She said we're allowed to love more than one person. He looked from his daughter's earnest face to the drawing in his hand. Maybe the fairy tale wasn't perfect. Maybe it came with broken pieces, old scars and second chances. But maybe, just maybe, there was still room in their story for a new chapter. It had been a week since the argument. It was a week of long silences, unspoken regrets, and a little girl who kept asking, when will Miss Ava come read to me again? Cole had replayed the scene in the greenhouse 100 times in his mind. His voice had been too loud, his words too sharp. He remembered the way Ava's eyes didn't fight back but just quietly broke. He hated himself for it. He hated how his foolish pride had built a wall between him and someone who had shown them nothing but care. That morning he rose early, not to fix a car, not to pay bills, but to bake. Ava had once told him during one of their quiet walks through the market that cinnamon apple bread reminded her of home. It was the only thing my grandmother ever made from scratch, she had said, every Sunday. It smelled like love and safety, so that's what he made. He knocked on the tall glass door of her downtown office building, around noon holding the loaf, carefully wrapped in a clean dish towel. The receptionist raised an eyebrow, but didn't stop him. Maybe she recognized his name from the hospital paperwork. Or maybe she just recognized the look in his eyes, one that said, this visit mattered more than anything else today. Ava looked up from her desk, startled to see him standing there. She set her pen down slowly. Her office was sleek, organized, and minimalist, much like her. But one corner was filled with children's books and a framed sketch of a little girl holding a red balloon. I baked, Cole said, simply holding up the loaf. I remembered what you said. Ava's lips parted, but no words came out. Can I sit? He asked. She just nodded. He set the bread down on the low coffee table between them and unwrapped it carefully. The warm, sweet scent of cinnamon and apples filled the room. It's probably too sweet, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I never measure things right, Ava smiled, a genuine, soft smile. It smells perfect. They sat across from each other in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that held both weight and meaning. Then finally Cole took a deep breath. I was wrong, he said, his voice clear and steady. I let my pride get loud, louder than my heart. And I hurt you. I am so sorry. Ava looked down at her hands, then back up at him. I wasn't upset because you yelled. I was upset because I never wanted you to think that I saw you as weak. Cole nodded slowly. I know that now. I was just scared. That's all. Scared of not being enough for her. Scared of being replaced. You're not replaceable, Cole. Not to Leia and not to me. He looked at her then, really looked at her. Not as the elegant woman from the fancy restaurant or the wealthy widow who had everything, but as someone who had lost more than she let on and still, somehow, chose to give. I miss you, he said quietly. Ava's smile grew, her eyes misting over. I miss her too. They both let out a gentle laugh, the kind that comes after tears have finally dried. I haven't had many people left in my life, Ava admitted after a while, but your daughter, she makes me believe in beginnings again. Cole reached across the table and gently took her hand in his. Her fingers didn't flinch, they curled perfectly around his. Ava looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. I don't need another fairy tale, she whispered. I just need someone real. I'm real, Cole said, his voice full of a promise he intended to keep. And I'm not going anywhere. The loaf of bread sat untouched on the table between them, but somehow the room already smelled like home. The hallway outside the operating room was far too quiet. Even the ticking of the clock on the wall seemed muffled under the crushing weight of waiting. Cole sat stiffly in a hard-backed chair, his hands clasped so tightly together that his knuckles were white. Next to him, Ava sat just as motionless, her hand wrapped gently but firmly around his. He had not let go of her since they arrived at dawn. Not when the nurse led Leia away. Not when the surgeon explained the delicate intricacies of heart valve repair. Not when Cole's breath hitched and he had whispered, please just bring her back to me. Ava's thumb moved slowly across his skin in a steady, reassuring rhythm. She knew that rhythm well. She had once held her own daughter's hand just like this, in a different hallway so many years ago. But this time was not the same. This time hope felt real and tangible. This time love did not sit in silence. It breathed right beside her. Hours passed like molasses. Cole didn't speak and Ava didn't push him to. Then finally the door swung open. The surgeon stepped out, his scrubs stained but his eyes clear. He pulled off his cap and offered a small, tired smile. She did. Great, he said. The valve is repaired. There were no complications. Cole dropped his head into his hands, a towel, ragged breath leaving him like a storm finally breaking. Ava wrapped both her arms around him, holding him tight as his shoulders shook with relief. And for the first time in years, she let herself cry, not from grief, but from overwhelming, beautiful relief. They waited another 2 hours before being allowed into the recovery room. Leia lay small and peaceful beneath crisp white sheets, a bandage on her chest, her cheeks slightly flushed with color. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, then blinked, adjusting to the soft light. Daddy, she whispered. Cole leaned over her, his voice cracking with love. I'm right. Here, sweetheart. Miss Ava too? Ava moved into her line of sight, her hand gently brushing Leia's curls back from her forehead. Of course I'm here, sunshine. Leia smiled faintly. Is this my new heart? Cole laughed softly, tears still clinging to his eyelashes. It's the same heart, Peanut. It's just stronger now. Leia blinked, still groggy from the anesthesia. Then she turned her head slowly toward Ava. Did Daddy tell you any fairy tales while I was sleeping? Ava looked at Cole, caught off guard. His cheeks reddened, a rare shyness crossing his rugged face. Ava smiled and leaned in close to Leia. He didn't tell me with words, she whispered. He told me with the way he looked at me. Leia's brow furrowed slightly, confused. What did the look say? Ava's voice grew even quieter, her eyes never leaving Cole's. It said, you are someone worth loving. Leia smiled again, a sleepy, contented smile, and closed her eyes, falling back into a soft, healing slumber. Cole and Ava sat beside her, side by side, their hands once again intertwined, this time for good. The next few days passed in gentle, happy waves. Leia grew stronger with each sunrise. She could sit up, eat applesauce, and even watch cartoons with a giggle. The nurses adored her, and the doctors smiled genuinely whenever they entered her room. Cole never left her side, but he also never stopped glancing across the room at Ava. She sat in the corner with a constant supply of books, flowers, puzzles, anything to bring a little more joy into the sterile room. One afternoon, while Leah was napping, Ava stood by the window, gazing out at the hospital garden below. Cole came to stand beside her quietly, his hands in his pockets. "She's my everything," he said, softly. Ava nodded, still looking out the window. "I know." He looked at her profile, at the way the sunlight caught the gentle curve of her cheek. "You are too." Ava turned. To him, her eyes wide with surprise. Cole took her hand again. "I spent so long being afraid to need someone. I always thought that kind of love made you weak. But you showed me it's what makes you brave." Ava blinked slowly, a wave of emotion welling up inside her. "You didn't just help Leah," continued his voice thick with sincerity. "You reminded me that I'm not alone, that I don't have to be." Ava reached up and touched his cheek, her thumb brushing against the faint line of stubble. "Neither do I." The day Leah was discharged from the hospital, the entire nursing staff gathered to wave her goodbye. She wore a bright yellow dress and a sparkly headband, clutching a new book Ava had given her titled The Girl with the Strongest Heart. As they stepped out of the hospital doors and into the warm sunlight, Cole took Ava's hand once more. This time, it wasn't because he needed the support. It was simply because he wanted to. Their family was not built in the usual way. It wasn't planned or perfect, but it was real. And it was just beginning. The golden La Fontaine sign shimmered above the entrance, the very same spot where a year ago Cole had stood frozen, clutching Leah's hand, his chest tight with shame. Today, everything was different. Balloons lined the walkway, and a hand-drawn banner proudly read, "Happy 6th birthday, Leah." The waiter smiled warmly, and the same maitre d' who had once rejected them now bowed politely. "Welcome back, Mr. Morgan. And a very happy birthday to you, young lady." Leah beamed, hugging a small ukulele, her yellow dress sparkling just like the tulips Ava had once brought to her hospital room. Cole, adjusting the tie he now wore with ease, kept his eyes on her, healthy, laughing, and so incredibly alive. Ava entered beside them, radiant in a soft green dress that echoed the one she'd worn on the night they first met. She no longer stood apart. She stood beside them where she belonged. They were seated at a special table near the fountain, the candlelight flickering on their happy faces. A 3-layer strawberry and cream cake arrived, Leah's absolute favorite. She insisted on lighting the 6 candles herself. Then, shyly, Leah stood on her chair. "This song is from my first mommy," she announced to their small group of friends and family. "She sang it to me before bed. Now I sing it because I have 2 people who love me big, and one of them helped fix my heart." The room hushed. She strummed her ukulele, beautifully off-key but full of pure joy. By the time she finished her simple song, many in the room were quietly wiping away tears. Cole reached for Ava's hand beneath the table and gave it a tight squeeze. She leaned her head on his shoulder, her eyes glistening with happy tears. Their home, a small house Cole had bought years ago, was now nestled in blooming ivy and wildflowers. The backyard was filled with tulips and a sturdy wooden swing that Cole had built himself. Inside, laughter echoed through the halls. Ava had moved in 6 months ago, after a quiet walk in the park and a simple life-changing question from Cole. "I don't want you to be a guest in our story anymore, Ava. I want you to help me write it." She had painted walls, planted marigolds, and built a new life with them, not from her wealth, but from shared memories and a mutual hope for the future. And with the money she once guarded in trusts, Ava had created the Isla Heart Fund, a medical grant for children with congenital heart disease named in honor of her daughter. There was no press release, just a quiet letter sent to local hospitals, an act as powerful and understated as Ava herself. "Helping one child," she had told Cole, "feels like letting Isla breathe again." That evening, after All the birthday guests had gone. Home, the three of them walked to the park. The sky glowed in soft shades of amber and pink. They kicked off their shoes and sat together on a wooden bench beneath the tall, wise oak trees. Laya plucked at her ukulele, humming a sweet, nonsensical tune that sounded like a lullaby. Ava leaned her head against Cole's shoulder. He shifted gently to hold her closer, his presence a steady, comforting anchor. "She's growing up so fast," Ava whispered. "Faster than I'm ready for." She looked at their joined hands, one strong and scarred from work, the other elegant and gentle, and she smiled. "You brought magic into our lives, Cole. Not the kind with spells and wands, but the real kind. Just by standing up for us when you could have walked away. By believing we were worth staying for." Ava blinked, and a single, happy tear slipped down her cheek. "Thank you," Cole said, his voice thick with emotion, "for bringing a fairy tale to a place where I thought there were only hard days." Beside them, Leia's song floated on, the evening breeze like a silk ribbon. And as the first stars began to appear in the twilight sky, Ava held on tight to the man who had once doubted his own worth, and to the little girl who had given her a reason to hope again. Because they had learned that true fairy tales don't need magic. They just need people who are brave enough to believe in them and brave enough to love. Everyone deserves one night to feel like a princess. If this story warmed your heart and reminded you that love can bloom even from the deepest grief, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who believes in second chances. And for more tales that touch your soul and stay with you long after the screen fades to black, don't forget to subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories. We bring you emotional journeys, heartwarming moments, and unforgettable characters every single week. Because sometimes the most beautiful fairy tales are the ones that happen in real life.